Today, in this video, we're going to be exploring 3 things about Gen Z that every church leader needs to know. Now, like every generation of young people, Gen Z has its own distinctives as a group, their own challenges as well. And because they're the first generation to grow up fully immersed in a digital world, they are truly unique. So let's talk about some of these characteristics and how to minister effectively to this special group. Let's dive in. Well, hey there, I'm Brady Shearer. This is Pro Church Tools, and I'm here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. If we're just meeting for the first time, consider subscribing and click the thumbs up button to upvote this video. Appreciate all of you subscribers that keep coming back to watch our new content and helping us out with that. Thank you as always. Now, let's begin by just defining the age bracket of Gen Z. It should go without saying that generational divides don't have true open and close dates, but Gen Z is commonly defined as people born between the years of 1999 and 2015. Now for me, I was born in 91, meaning I'm a millennial, those born between 1984 and 1998. We've talked a ton about millennials on this channel. We're unique because we're the generation that bridges the gap between the world before the internet and the world with the internet. So we came of age at the same time digital, the internet, and social media were coming of age. But we also remember what it was like before. I mean, believe it or not, the home that I grew up in had a rotary phone. And before I even went to high school, we had gone from a rotary phone to a corded phone to a cordless home phone. And now home phones are a thing of the past. So technology moves quickly. And Gen Z, well, they're the first generation to be born into this world fully immersed without real memories of what it was like before. Now, much of the data that I'm about to share with you comes from our friends at Barna. We're so grateful for the work that they do. Specifically, they've got 2 bigger reports on Gen Z Volume 1 and Gen Z Volume 2. What I'll be touching on in this video represents some of the standout data to me, but I'm barely scratching the surface here of what's contained in those 2 reports, so I'd encourage you to pick them up for yourself. Let's begin with the first distinctive of Gen Z. Recent data from the American Psychological Association has found that Gen Z are the most likely of any generation to report seeking help regarding their mental health. Moreover, within Gen Z, more than 8 in 10 report at least one instance of a traumatic experience. So, upon hearing that, my question for you is this. Do you think Gen Z is disproportionately affected by traumatic experiences? Or does Gen Z need more help with their mental health than older folks? Because my guess would be no. Instead, what I think we're seeing with younger people is a greater level of awareness with their mental health, and perhaps even more importantly, an ability to articulate what they're going through and experiencing. So this is the challenge for those serving in youth ministry, because if you have a generation that is more skilled at identifying and articulating mental health struggles, if that language is not something you as a youth leader are fluent in, there's going to be a ceiling on how much you can relate to your students emotionally and how much that you can support them. And the reason I'm leading with this point about Gen Z is that one of the gifts of youth ministry within the church is that when it's done well, students have godly role models in their lives during that most turbulent and volatile season of adolescence. That relationship, though, will struggle to be deeply meaningful if the younger person feels like there's a lack of EQ, emotional intelligence, on the part of the leader. So as a leader, your aim should be to provide support for students and actively address the negative emotions they're dealing with, because Gen Z is more than capable and willing to talk about those things, which is historically distinct amongst young people, but that also requires fluency in that language for you, the leader. Next, let's talk about screens and digital media. On average, within Gen Z, amongst those with smartphones, young people are spending about 6 hours per day on their phones. In addition to that, 2 hours per day on video games, another close to 2 hours daily on streaming services, about an hour and a half listening to music, and about 1 hour watching live TV. So suffice to say, altogether, it's a lot of time on screens and with digital media. And unlike mental health issues, I would not expect Gen Z to have the same awareness or ability to navigate the world of digital and how to not let it consume you. And that's because digital is an all-encompassing force, and societally, we have not yet proven that we can handle it all that well, even though most of us can remember a world without it. So I would not expect kids to demonstrate much digital discernment. And yet, of course, you and I know how important it is. For young people specifically, beauty standards, social cues, relationships, sex, and pornography, those are just a few things that are shaped by digital platforms. And if you as a younger person are not prepared for these kind of things, they're just gonna eat you alive. And this is where youth leaders can be such a tremendous ally for young people by supporting and advising them on how to use devices wisely. Talk about standards for digital hygiene, what's healthy, what's not. And don't let your students be thrown into the ocean of digital at such a young age with the resignation that some will sing and some will swim. And then along that same vein, for leaders involved in the world of digital media, we have a free workshop to help you along the way. It's our social media crash course for smaller churches. It's about 45 minutes long. Like I said, it's free. We just need your email. And this workshop contains everything your church needs to make sense of social media all in one place. It's linked in the description, or if you go to nucleus.church, you can find it under the navigation button that says Learn. I talk about social media policy in this workshop, the unique challenges of being a smaller church and social and how to navigate that. There are also a ton of bonus downloads and files for you within the workshop. Social media crash course for smaller churches. It's free. It's linked in the description and above me. So we've talked about the emotional landscape for Gen Z. We've talked about the digital landscape. Let's turn our attention now to the final thing about Gen Z you need to know as it pertains to the Christian landscape. And author David Kinnaman and his book Faith for Exiles is going to be instructive for us here. Kinnaman has likened the experience of young Christians today to the Babylonian exile of God's people in the Old Testament. And I'm going to quote here an excerpt from Barna's report, Gen Z Volume 2, from page 61. Kinnaman proposes that today's teens and young adults find themselves in digital Babylon, a foreign, tech-enabled, pagan cultural climate where relativism rules the day and faith is pushed to the margins. Like the prophet Daniel and Israel's remnant who chose faithfulness to God above the demands of the times, resilient young disciples respond to an increasingly hostile culture by pursuing God's presence, developing cultural discernment, forging intergenerational relationships, training for vocational discipleship, and engaging in countercultural mission. So, what does this mean for youth pastors and leaders? Well, we have a responsibility to mentor young Christians on what it means to hold to orthodoxy, while at the same time acknowledging the wrongdoings of our own faith. And what I mean by that is, when I was a student preparing to leave for Bible college and head out into the world to live on my own, the preparation that was done in my church had a lot to do with resisting the secular culture that was gonna push me to abandon my faith. And I would say that I was well prepared for that. What I wasn't prepared for was the curtain being pulled back on my faith, revealing all of the skeletons in the closet. One of the distinctives of my generation, millennials, is popularizing what we know as deconstruction. And in my experience, the cause of faith deconstruction is often misunderstood because many believe it's these external forces like a hostile culture or secular worldviews that act as vultures picking and prodding at your faith until there's nothing left. But more often than not, it's the internal forces within our own faith that start the process of deconstruction. When you see systematic failure within the institutions that you've come to trust, it's easy to lose faith altogether because in my formative years, my church did an excellent job of villainizing the external culture, but did a poor job of holding our faith's own institutions accountable. And for my part, the primary reason I have my faith today intact is because of my mother, because during my formative years, she never stopped banging the drum of orthodoxy in our home. And that foundation was able to withstand not only the external forces of culture that I was prepared for, but more importantly, when I was blindsided by the skeletons found in the closets of the institutions of faith I never expected to find, I could still fall back on that orthodoxy. And so for the part of Gen Z, while it's true that in the last 30 years, culture has become more hostile to faith, it's also true that in that same time frame, institutional Christianity in the West has not lived up to the orthodoxical standards of our faith. There are real systemic problems in our institutions. So as a leader of young people, you need to be prepared to do both, equipping your students for hostile culture and being transparent about the failings of our own institutions. Because it's better to have those conversations earlier than later. That'll do it for this video. As always, thank you for your time, attention, and trust. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. So sound off in the comments, and we'll talk soon.